The gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Rock Springs, Wyoming, in 1875, causing Katherine Valdez to drop to the ground behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood above her head. Her heart hammered against her chest as she clutched her medical bag, wondering how a simple house call could have landed her in the middle of a shootout between the sheriff and a gang of outlaws who just robbed the town bank. The dirt clung to Katherine's blue dress as she pressed herself against the wooden trough, trying to make herself as small as possible. She was the town's only doctor, having taken over after her father passed last winter. At 26, she'd faced skepticism from most of the townspeople about a woman doctor, but she'd slowly earned their grudging respect through sheer competence and determination. Another bullet whizzed overhead, and Katherine flinched. The bank was just 20 yards away, but it might as well have been 20 miles. Her patient, old Mrs. Henderson, was waiting for her to check on her rheumatism, but that would have to wait if Katherine couldn't make it out of this alive. Stay down. A deep voice commanded as a large figure dove behind the trough beside her, the spurs on his boots jingling as he landed. Katherine startled, but quickly recognized Garrett Zachary, one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. His black hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his leather vest was covered in trail dust. "Mr. Zachary, what are you doing here?" Katherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Trying not to get shot, same as you, Doc," he replied with a grim smile. He peeked over the edge of the trough, then ducked back down as another shot rang out. "Those are the Becker brothers. They've been terrorizing towns across 3 territories." Katherine nodded, recognizing the name. She'd treated victims of their violence before. "The Sheriff Mills, is pinned down at the Mercantile," Garrett interrupted. "Deputies are on the other side of town. It's just us between those outlaws and their escape route." Katherine's eyes widened. "But I'm a doctor, not a gunfighter." Garrett checked the revolver in his hand, spinning the cylinder to make sure it was loaded. His eyes met hers, blue and steady as the Wyoming sky. "I need to move around to the side of the bank. Think you can create a distraction?" "Me?" Katherine's voice rose in panic. "How am I supposed to do that? Just need to give me 30 seconds. Then I can get a clean shot." Katherine shook her head, her chestnut hair coming loose from its pins. "I can't. I'm not strong enough for this." Garrett's weathered hand covered hers, warm and calloused from years of ranch work. His voice softened. "Then lean on me, Doc. We'll get through this together." Something in his steady gaze gave Katherine courage. She nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "When I count to 3, knock over this water trough. The noise and water will draw their attention." "I'll move while they're distracted." Katherine took a deep breath and positioned her hands against the trough. "Ready. 1, 2, 3. Katherine pushed with all her strength. The trough tipped over, sending water cascading across the street. Gunfire immediately turned their way, bullets splashing into puddles as Garrett sprinted toward the side of the bank, staying low. Katherine pressed herself against the building behind her, praying silently. For a moment, everything went silent. Then 3 shots rang out in quick succession, followed by shouts and the sound of a body falling. "Come out with your hands up," Garrett's voice boomed. "Your brother's down and the sheriff's got you covered from the other side." After a tense moment, Katherine heard the clatter of a gun being dropped. She peered around the corner to see the remaining Becker brother emerging from the bank, hands raised as Garrett kept him covered. Sheriff Mills appeared from his position, rushing forward to secure the outlaw. Only then did Garrett lower his weapon, turning to look for Katherine. She stepped out from her hiding place, medical bag in hand. "Is anyone hurt?" The younger Becker took a bullet in the shoulder, Garrett said. "Nothing fatal." Katherine nodded and moved toward the wounded outlaw, her doctor's instincts taking over despite her fear. As she knelt beside him, she felt Garrett's presence behind her, steady and protective. "That was brave, Doc," he said quietly. Katherine shook her head as she opened her medical bag. "I was terrified. Bravery isn't about not being scared," Garrett replied. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. As Katherine worked to stem the bleeding from the outlaw's shoulder, she couldn't help but notice how Garrett stayed close by, his hand never far from his gun, watching over her as she worked. Something stirred inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced before. After the wounded were treated and the outlaws secured in the jail, Garrett walked Katherine to Mrs. Henderson's house to complete her interrupted house call. "I can manage from here, Mr. Zachary," Katherine said as they reached the white picket fence. Garrett tipped his hat. "Call me Garrett, Doc, and I reckon our paths will cross again soon." His words proved prophetic. The very next day, as Katherine was organizing her supplies in her small clinic attached to her house, she heard the jingling of spurs on her porch. A knock followed. "Come in," she called, expecting one of her regular patients. Instead, Garrett Zachary filled the doorway, holding his hat in his hands. "Doc, I was hoping you might have time to look at something." Katherine gestured to the examination table. "Of course, what seems to be the problem?" Garrett set his hat aside and rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long gash on his forearm. "Barbed wire, happened this morning while fixing a fence." Katherine tusked as she examined the wound. "This needs cleaning and stitches. It could easily get infected." She prepared her instruments, aware of his eyes following her movements. "You should have come sooner." "Had to finish the fence," he said simply. "Cattle don't wait on injuries." As Katherine cleaned the wound, she noticed old scars criss-crossing his skin. "You've had a difficult life, Mr. Zachary." "Garrett," he reminded her, "and life out here isn't easy for anyone." She nodded, threading her needle. "This will hurt." Garrett didn't flinch as she began stitching. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have," she replied. "How long have you been in Rock Springs?" 5 years. Came out from Texas after the war, built my ranch from nothing." His eyes met hers. "What about you?" "Most lady doctors I've heard of practice back east." Katherine's hands remained steady as she worked. "My father was the doctor here for 30 years. He taught me everything he knew, sent me to medical school in Philadelphia. When he got sick, I came back to help. After he passed, I stayed. The town's lucky to have you." Katherine tied off the last stitch. "Not everyone thinks so. There are still plenty who don't believe a woman should be a doctor." "Fools," Garrett said simply. Katherine smiled as she bandaged his arm. "There, keep it clean and come back in a week to have the stitches removed." Garrett stood, reaching for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" $3. He placed a $5 gold piece on her desk. "Keep the change." "That's too much. Consider it my thanks for yesterday." He picked up his hat, settling it on his head. "I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel restaurant tomorrow evening." Katherine blinked in surprise. "Supper, as a proper thank you," he added quickly. "For your help with the Beckers." Katherine hesitated. She rarely socialized, focusing instead on her practice, but something about Garrett Zachary intrigued her. "All right, 7 o'clock." His smile transformed his weathered face. 7 it is." After Garrett left, Katherine found herself smiling as she cleaned her instruments. It had been a long time since anyone had asked her to supper, especially someone like Garrett Zachary. The following evening, Katherine spent more time than usual preparing for supper. She chose her best dress, a deep green that brought out the hazel of her eyes, and pinned her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Rock Springs, with white tablecloths and a small vase of wildflowers on each table. When Katherine entered, she saw Garrett already waiting, dressed in a clean black suit that made him look distinctly uncomfortable but undeniably handsome. He stood as she approached. "You look lovely, Doc." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "And please call me Katherine." Garrett held her chair for her. "Katherine it is." Conversation flowed surprisingly easily over their meal. Garrett told her about his ranch, the Double Z, and his plans to expand his herd of Herefords. Katherine shared stories of unusual cases she'd treated and her struggles to win over skeptical patients. "Most of the men in town accept me now," she said, "but the women were actually harder to convince." "Why's that?" Garrett asked. They didn't think a woman doctor would understand women's complaints better than a male doctor. They thought because I went to medical school, I must be unwomanly somehow. Garrett shook his head. Nothing unwomanly about you from where I'm sitting. Katherine felt warmth spread through her at his words. Thank you, that's kind of you to say. As they finished their dessert apple pie with fresh cream, Garrett seemed to grow nervous. I was wondering if I might call on you again, Katherine, not for medical reasons. Katherine set down her fork. Garrett, I should be honest, I've dedicated my life to medicine. I don't have time for courtship. I understand dedication to a calling, he said. My ranch demands everything I have, but even the most dedicated people need companionship sometimes. Before Katherine could respond, the restaurant door burst open and a frantic young man rushed in. Doc Valdez, you're needed. There's been an accident at the mine. Katherine was on her feet immediately. I'll get my bag. I'll drive you, Garrett said, tossing money on the table to cover their meal. My wagon's outside. Minutes later, they were racing toward the coal mine at the edge of town. The mine was Rock Springs' economic lifeblood, employing dozens of men, including many Chinese immigrants who faced discrimination and dangerous working conditions. When they arrived, chaos reigned. A tunnel had collapsed, trapping miners inside. Some had been pulled out already, bloodied and covered in coal dust. Katherine jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped, hurrying to the makeshift treatment area. For the next several hours, she worked tirelessly, setting broken bones, stitching wounds, and treating crush injuries. Garrett stayed by her side, fetching water, holding lamps for better light, and comforting the injured when Katherine moved on to the next patient. His steady presence made her work easier, his quiet strength a support she hadn't known she needed. As dawn broke, the last miners were brought out, some alive, some not. Exhausted, Katherine sat on an overturned crate, her once green dress now stained black with coal dust and blood. Garrett handed her a cup of water. You need rest. There's one more, Katherine said, looking toward a Chinese miner with a badly crushed leg. He needs amputation or he'll die from gangrene. You can barely stand, Garrett observed. Katherine looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed with fatigue. I have to try. Then I'll help you, Garrett said simply. Together, they prepared for the grim task. Garrett held the man down and followed Katherine's instructions precisely as she performed the amputation. His calm presence steadied her shaking hands as she worked. When it was finally over and the miner was resting as comfortably as possible given the circumstances, Garrett helped Katherine to his wagon for the ride back to town. Thank you, she said quietly. I couldn't have done that alone. Garrett looked down at her. You never have to be alone again if you don't want to be. Katherine was too exhausted to fully process his words, but they settled in her heart like seeds waiting to sprout. Over the following weeks, Garrett found reasons to visit Katherine regularly. Sometimes he brought injured ranch hands for treatment. Other times, he came bearing gifts, fresh vegetables from his garden, wild strawberries he'd found while riding fence, a new medical journal that had arrived on the stagecoach. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, watching the clock as evening approached, hoping to hear the now familiar sound of his spurs on her porch steps. One evening, as summer turned to autumn, Garrett invited her for a ride to see his ranch. Katherine accepted, curious about the place he spoke of with such pride. The Double Z was 5 miles outside town, nestled in a valley with a clear creek running through it. As they crested a hill, the ranch spread out before them, a sturdy main house, a large barn, bunkhouse, and corrals where cattle and horses grazed in green pastures. It's beautiful, Katherine said, genuinely impressed. It's home, Garrett replied simply, his voice filled with quiet pride. Would you like to see inside? The ranch house was larger than Katherine expected, with a spacious kitchen, comfortable parlor, and several bedrooms. It was clean but Spartan, clearly a bachelor's home. My mother would say this place needs a woman's touch, Katherine observed, running her finger along a dusty shelf. She'd be right, Garrett agreed. Mrs. Wilkins comes from town once a week to clean, but it's not the same as having someone care for a home properly. Katherine turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Garrett, he took a step closer. I know you're dedicated to your practice, Katherine. I admire that about you, but I can't stop thinking about you. I've been thinking about you too, she admitted softly. Garrett reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I've never met anyone like you, strong enough to face down outlaws and perform surgeries for hours, yet gentle enough to comfort a child with a splinter. Katherine looked down at their joined hands. My work has always come first. I've never allowed myself to. To what? She met his gaze. To feel what I'm feeling now. Garrett's other hand came up to touch her cheek. May I kiss you, Katherine? She nodded, her heart pounding as he leaned in. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss tender and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. When they parted, Katherine felt dizzy with emotion. I should get back to town, she whispered. I have patients in the morning. Garrett nodded, though reluctance was clear in his eyes. I'll take you home. As autumn progressed, their courtship blossomed. Garrett would bring her wildflowers, take her on rides across his land, and sometimes simply sit with her in comfortable silence as she updated her patient records in the evening. But their growing closeness was tested when winter arrived early that year, bringing with it a devastating outbreak of influenza. Katherine worked day and night, moving from home to treat the sick. Garrett supported her however he could, delivering medicines, helping to move patients, and ensuring she ate and rested when possible. As the epidemic worsened, Katherine began to show signs of strain. Her face grew pale, and dark circles formed under her eyes. Still, she pushed on, determined not to lose a single patient. One night, as she stumbled from the sick of the mayor's young daughter, Garrett caught her arm. You need rest, Katherine. I can't, she protested weakly. There are too many sick. You'll be no good to anyone if you collapse, he insisted, guiding her to a chair. Katherine's shoulders slumped. I don't know if I can do this, Garrett. So many are sick. Some will die no matter what I do. You can't save everyone, he said gently. Tears filled her eyes. Then what good am I as a doctor? You're doing everything humanly possible, Garrett assured her. No one could do more. Katherine looked up at him, her expression vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. I'm not strong enough for this. I thought I was, but I'm not. Garrett knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Then lean on me. That's what I'm here for. She fell into his arms, allowing herself the luxury of tears she'd been holding back for days. Garrett held her, his steady heartbeat against her ear a comforting rhythm. When her tears subsided, Garrett spoke softly. Let me take you home. You need sleep. But the mayor's daughter, I'll sit with her. If her fever rises, I'll wake you. Katherine was too exhausted to argue further. She allowed Garrett to escort her home and tuck her into bed like a child, his gentle kiss on her forehead the last thing she remembered before falling into deep sleep. When she woke hours later, Garrett was sitting in a chair beside her bed, his head nodding as he dozed. Katherine watched him for a moment, overwhelmed by the devotion it must have taken to keep this vigil. Garrett, she whispered. He jerked awake immediately. Katherine, how are you feeling? Better, she said truthfully. The mayor's daughter. Her fever broke an hour ago, he said with a smile. She asked for water and fell back asleep. Relief washed over Katherine. Thank God, over the next 2 weeks they fought the epidemic together. Katherine providing medical care, Garrett offering strength and support where needed. Gradually, the number of new cases declined, and those who had fallen ill began to recover. By Christmas, the worst was over. The town held a special service to honor those lost and to thank Katherine for her tireless efforts. Afterward, Garrett invited her to spend Christmas dinner at his ranch. The ranch house had been transformed. Pine boughs adorned the mantelpiece, candles glowed in every window, and a small tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper stars and wooden ornaments. It's lovely, Katherine said, touched by the effort he'd made. I wanted it to be special, Garrett replied, helping her remove her coat. After a wonderful dinner of roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie, they sat before the fire, enjoying hot cider and each other's company. "I have something for you," Garrett said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to find a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a gold locket engraved with intertwined roses. "Garrett, it's beautiful," she breathed. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a small photograph of her father that she recognized from her own collection. On the opposite side was a lock of dark hair. "Is this yours?" she asked, touching the hair. Garrett nodded. "So you'll always have both of us close to your heart." Tears pricked Katherine's eyes. "This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." Garrett took her hands in his. "Katherine, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know your work is important to you, and I would never ask you to give it up." "I know you wouldn't," she said softly. "What I'm asking is if you might consider practicing medicine from here." He gestured around the room. "This ranch has plenty of space. We could build you a proper clinic. You'd be closer to the outlying farms, and I'd make sure you could still get to town when needed." Katherine's heart raced as she realized what he was proposing. "Garrett, are you asking me to marry you?" He slid from the sofa to one knee before her. "Yes, Katherine Valdez, I am. I love you with everything I am. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Katherine's mind whirled with possibilities. Marriage had never been part of her plan, but neither had falling in love with a rancher with kind eyes and a steadfast heart. "What about my independence?" she asked. "As a married woman, I'd lose certain legal rights." "We'll draw up papers with a lawyer," Garrett said without hesitation. "Your practice will remain yours, your earnings will remain yours. I won't have you sacrifice your profession for marriage." Katherine's eyes widened. "You've thought this through." "I have," he confirmed. "I don't want to change who you are, Katherine. I just want to be by your side while you continue to be the extraordinary woman I fell in love with." Katherine felt tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Garrett's face lit with joy as he rose to pull her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a tender kiss. They were married in the spring of 1876, in a small ceremony in Rock Springs Church. As Garrett had promised, they built a clinic attached to the ranch house, allowing Katherine to continue her practice while making the Double Z her home. Their partnership flourished, each supporting the other's work. Katherine's medical practice expanded to include many of the outlying ranches and farms, while the Double Z prospered under Garrett's careful management. In the winter of 1877, their first child was born, a son they named James, after Katherine's father. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth. The children grew up surrounded by the ranch's operations, learning both cattle ranching from their father and basic medicine from their mother. As the years passed, Katherine and Garrett faced challenges together: drought, harsh winters, economic downturns, and the occasional outlaw trouble. Through it all, they remained each other's strength, just as they had been that first day behind the water trough. On their 20th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Garrett took Katherine's hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying a dusty old cowboy instead of some city doctor?" Katherine smiled, the years having added character to her still beautiful face. "Never, not for a single moment, even when times were hard, especially then," she said, squeezing his hand. "You taught me something important that first day, Garrett. Sometimes true strength comes from knowing when to lean on someone else." Garrett's eyes, still as blue as the Wyoming sky, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who reach out their hand to help others stand." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, content in the life they'd built together. "I love you, Garrett Zachary, and I love you, Katherine Zachary," he replied, kissing the top of her head, "until the end of my days." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a frightened doctor hiding behind a water trough to the confident woman she was now, she had found strength not only in herself, but in the steady love of the man beside her. In the distance, their son rode in from checking the herd, their daughter waved from the garden she tended, and the lights of the clinic where Katherine had healed countless patients glowed warmly. This was their legacy, this land, these children, the lives they'd touched. And it had all begun with a moment of courage when she'd admitted she wasn't strong enough, and he had simply said, "Then lean on me."